What's going on, everybody? Welcome to a much different episode of the Rhodes Goes Last podcast that you have ever seen before. I don't even know if I necessarily call this an episode, but I told you guys in the video from last week that we were going to be doing some more wrestling content, and here it is, the beginning of that, the genesis of that, if you will. I got my good friend Daniel Lindsay here. I told you that there was going to be somebody, a good friend of mine that lives here in Greenville, who's going to come on the podcast, and he was going to help talk about wrestling because that's just something that I've always wanted to do on the channel and just haven't really had the time, haven't had the platform, haven't really had the motivation to do so. But now I have another person to bounce stuff off of. It's just a lot more fun than me just sitting here for an hour ranting about wrestling. Nobody wants to hear that, including me. So sorry in advance, Daniel, you're going to be part of that. But I will say, just there you go. I will just say before we start, I know he's very low to the ground. I don't have any other chairs, guys. I'm gonna figure something else out in the next, a handful of videos here that I'm gonna do. I don't know what it's gonna be. I'm gonna figure something out. But obviously, this is the best that I can do at the moment. And so this is just what we're gonna have to deal with. But Daniel, enough about all the logistics. How are you doing?
Doing great. I'm ready to do this with you. Been kind of wanting to do something like this myself for a long time. Recent months, just really gotten back into watching wrestling more, listening to more wrestling podcasts, just kind of keeping abreast. It's always nice when you find someone in a corner of a workplace or church or whatever to just say, hey, I'm a wrestling fan too. It's great. Instant friendship. So just looking forward just to, talking about this. We get able to do fancy booking, predictions, wherever this takes us. I'm excited.
I'm excited too, and obviously, like I kind of mentioned in the intro, it's something I've wanted to do, but I gotta be honest, not a whole lot of wrestling fans around where I've been over the last handful of years, and obviously I'm not gonna destroy my wife's life by making her do all this stuff. So I'm very happy to be able to do something like this, but. For all of you at home, why we are doing this, if you do not know, Survivor Series, one of the big five now, because I think you could probably consider Money in the Bank to be, a big pay-per-view during the year. A big five WWE pay-per-view of the year. It definitely has been my least favorite of the big five over the last handful of years, but ever since last year they started Wargames, I actually went to Survivor Series Wargames in person in Boston, Massachusetts last year. It was so much fun. I had an absolute blast. And so now it's obviously, much better. It's a lot different than the other big five pay-per-views. A much different feel to it. It doesn't quite feel like as much pomp and circumstance, but it's still very unique with the Wargames concept. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about Wargames, not just the match, but also obviously the overarching Survivor Series Wargames pay-per-view. We're going to be doing match predictions, might even be doing a little bit of future booking depending on the scenarios and what we think might happen next with certain wrestlers, if not all of them. So strap in, folks. This is going to be awesome. It's going to be a lot of fun. And as always, if this is your first time here, subscribe, like the video, do all that fun stuff. It takes 2 seconds, and I'd really appreciate it. And especially if you guys want to see more stuff like this, let me know and show out your support by subscribing, by liking the video. That's how I'm going to know that you guys are going to want to, have more of this stuff. So, Daniel, first match we're going to talk about today is the Women's Wargame match. So, obviously, just so you all know, this is being recorded a few nights before the last SmackDown before Survivor Series. So anything that may have happened on the SmackDown, I think it's on the 23rd or something like that, or 24th, whatever that day is. We don't know what that stuff is yet. So please take that into account when you're listening to this. If there are any updates, for instance, right now this Women's Wargames match is right now 4-on-4, and I think based on where it's going, it's going to stay that way. But you never know. Maybe they change it to 5-on-5 on Friday. If they have done that, it hasn't happened yet. So we are just working with the current events as to what we have now. So just keep that in mind at home. So Women's Wargames match, obviously you've got Damage Control, the new iteration, along with obviously the new members of Asuka and Kairi Sane, who just returned at Crown Jewel. And they're going to be facing Charlotte Flair, Bianca Belair. Wow. Who else is even on that team? Shotzi and Becky Lynch.
Becky Lynch is a new addition there. I kind of like to say that's almost like you got Damage Control versus the Superstars, because once Becky Lynch showed up on Raw last night, she is kind of like three biggest names outside of Damage Control and women's wrestling right now, and Shotzi. And that's not a shade against Shotzi. Shotzi's actually one of those that has been there before with Wargames.
She has.
So has Io. Io's been, I think it was in all 3 iterations at NXT.
I believe she has been in every single women's Wargames match in history so
each
far.
side has
the current one.
Right, so each side has, someone who's been there before. So I think that's going to be very interesting. But like you said, new iteration of Damage Control. But yeah, I think it's like Damage Control versus Superstars.
Sure.
And which way do you go? Because Becky and Charlotte haven't always gotten along, but Charlotte's kind of like, oh, I need backup. I guess you're the only person to call at this point. I don't know. I think a lot of interesting things could come out of this. Bayley is kind of being pictured as the odd woman out in a sense, but they still want to keep her in. But when you have the rest of Damage Control, they've known each other. They've had different things together before, so it's like, well, they push Bayley out. If Bayley costs in this match, maybe she does get pushed out.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's so many different directions that you can go in. And obviously the additions of Asuka and Kairi Sane to Damage Control have really made Damage Control a lot more interesting. I quite frankly had soured on them months ago. I think that they should have pulled the trigger on doing some kind of rivalry months ago. But then obviously now... I would say this probably wasn't the original plan, because obviously you can never count on Kairi Sane re-signing. But so now that Kairi Sane is back and you now have Asuka joining the group, I think it just makes that group a whole lot more interesting, and now it makes a lot more sense as to why they're still a group. I think there's so many different directions that you can go in terms of the group. And it makes me very happy, obviously, that Io Sky is still your women's champion, and she's carrying that torch, because I think that she's fantastic. She's always been fantastic. I loved her in NXT. I loved her on the main roster. I've always been a proponent of her to be in a main event slot. I do think that sometimes, and this isn't even just Io Shirai, but Io Sky now. Sorry, it's so many years. Still working on it. It's a lot of women's matches. I think that sometimes they try to fit in so much stuff in such a short amount of time that sometimes they just go so fast and it ends up kind of being sloppy every once in a while. But you'll see that in some Io Sky matches here and there. But I still love the way that they perform. I love the way she performs in particular. So I hope that she continues to hold that belt all the way to WrestleMania. I think she deserves a WrestleMania Women's Championship match, because pretty much every year it's your Charlottes, it's your Beckys, it's your Bianca Belairs, and nothing against any of those. I love all three. But I think it would obviously, kind of like what you did with Rhea last year. Obviously, I think Rhea's in a different spot. Everybody loved Rhea. Not that nobody loved Io Sky, but everybody knew Rhea Ripley was the next big thing long before she got that WrestleMania main event. And I think Io needs to kind of get there. And so I think really giving her that would elevate her. But anyway, that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about Wargames. So in terms of the match itself, who do you have coming out on top?
I'm still going back and forth as we're kind of talking here, but I feel it's gonna be Damage Control. I just don't. Even though you got the superstar team, I feel like you have a cohesion between Damage Control, again, all these women working together before, even especially in NXT, and I think kind of going back to Io Sky a little bit, not as many people, I don't think, recognize her as much as they recognize Rhea, just because, unless they were following her in NXT. If they don't really follow her in NXT, there's probably not as much of attention to her as it was with Rhea. Rhea already had a WrestleMania match way before this iteration of Rhea was really born. Io hasn't really had that. So, but I think it's going to be Damage Control. I think you kind of got a team that's kind of put together versus a team that's been together for a while and added two exciting pieces as well. And Dakota Kai isn't cleared to wrestle, but obviously that's an X factor there. You're talking about 4-on-4, but could you there? And I kind of wonder. We haven't really seen Jade come out yet with anything, any kind of brand. Could she kind of get involved somewhere there too? I don't think so. I think they would. I think they're kind of saving her a little bit longer. I don't know if she's even ready because former center hasn't picked a brand yet for her, but that gives her a great opportunity to get involved because she's not really on a brand. She's not really tied to any of them at all. So, maybe she comes out and then Dakota Kai comes out. But I think at the end of the day, it's gonna be Damage Control.
I agree. I also think Damage Control's got to come out on top here. Like you said, they just added 2 new exciting pieces. Triple H, and I'm gonna be. You guys all always know I'm honest of what my opinions are. Obviously, Triple H is the best thing that's happened to WWE in quite some time creatively. He has made everything so much better. But there is one thing that I think Triple H has been, quite frankly, a little bit poor at, and it's booking baby faces. He's not the best at really pulling the trigger on your big-time baby faces. And that's not to say that he hasn't built big-time baby faces. He has built big-time baby faces probably better than Vince ever did. I mean, think about since 2006, the guys that Vince called the good guys were the guys that not everybody, but a lot of people, all the basically grown men would boo. Your John Cena's, your Roman Reigns, your Randy Orton's. Like, those are the guys. Your Batistas, right? Like, the guys that he would present as, these are the big good guys. They weren't, right? We rejected them for various reasons. For other wrestlers that we wanted to be in that spot. Your CM Punks, your Daniel Bryans, etc., etc. That's another guy, CM Punk, that we probably are going to have to talk about, unfortunately, at some point tonight. But I think that he just hasn't booked baby faces in a great way in terms of pulling the trigger. Obviously, Roman is a big catalyst in that. Basically, every big-time babyface has been fed to Roman. And there's reasons for that. Obviously, we'll talk about either on this iteration of this podcast or in another one as to what we think the ultimate plan for Roman's going to be. But I think that at the end of the day, when I'm picking, when I'm 50-50 on stuff, because I think that it could really go either way, kind of like what you said. Damage Control, I think, should win just because it's their first match together with their 2 new exciting pieces. You shouldn't have them lose their first match when basically, other than Dakota, obviously, as you mentioned, being not cleared, all of them together.
Right.
Like, I understand if, they're losing some singles matches or a 2-on-2 tag team match, with certain, combinations. But when they're all together, you can't have them lose their first match. I think Damage Control's got to go over. But I can also see, kind of like what you mentioned again with, hey, if Bayley costs them this match, I think there's some elements of storytelling, but I think it's a little. I think they have to be holding out just something at WrestleMania, whether it's for the title or whether it's just a women's tag team match between Asuka and or Kairi Sane and Io Shirai. Or I said it again. Good grief, I can't help it. She's been Io Shirai for her entire life. Forgive me. Between maybe it's a 6-woman tag between Io Sky, Asuka, and Kairi Sane versus Bayley and 2 other, Dakota and somebody else. I don't know what they're doing with that. I think they're saving it to WrestleMania, so I think it's a little early to pull the trigger. So I would say Damage Control's probably got to go over here, just because again it makes the most sense. And another reason why I'm hesitant, and I talked to you about this off camera a little bit, is basically every year what WWE has done is one Wargames match is won by the good guys, one Wargames match is won by the bad guys. Sometimes it flip-flops. I mean, when I think the only year that they did the good guys won both matches was that year in NXT, and I don't remember what year it was. I think it was like 2018, maybe 2019. That one where it was Raquel, Candice LeRae, Dakota Kai, and Tegan Nox. Or maybe it wasn't Raquel. Maybe it was Bianca. I can't remember. It was those 3 definitely, and Tegan Nox, Dakota Kai, and Candice LeRae, and then somebody else. I'm pretty sure it was either Bianca or Raquel Rodriguez, and versus Io Shirai and Bianca Belair and a couple other heels at the time. And they did like a 4-on-2 thing, and the babyfaces won, and then I think the good guys went over in the main event as well for the guys' Wargames. So I think that's the only year they've done the same thing, but basically every other year, including last year, If you watched, the babyface team for the women won in the opener, and then obviously the Bloodline won, and they do a 50-50 pretty basically every year, and so that's another reason why I'm hesitant. But I think Damage Control's got to go over.
Yeah, and I think it's too early. As you're saying, too early to pull the trigger on having them kick Bayley out already. If Triple H does do things well, it's factions and it's to maybe some degree too much of long-term storytelling. And I think before Dakota Kai got injured, I think they're kind of moving towards that breakup role between the three of them. But then she got injured, so they kind of adjusted, and now that's given them an opportunity to do this with expanding Damage Control. And honestly, I love when I see factions. I love to see if you have enough people, put kind of like you did back in the day with the Shield. Have one of the secondary titles on one of the guys, on one of the persons, and the other two have the tag titles.
Yep.
I think that'd be great for Damage Control. They've held it before, so put the tag titles on them again. Io's got the women's championship already, and like you said, have them home to WrestleMania. The women's tag team division needs a boost. This is a great way to keep Damage Control together, keep Bayley in that manager type role. Then maybe Dakota Kai is finally cleared, and that's when they push her out. I think you almost kind of wait for her to be cleared to push her out. So yeah, I think
for sure, and I think you see that a lot with Triple H booking. Injuries kind of playing a role, and then obviously changing plans, but sticking, eventually coming back to that original plan. I mean, obviously, what sticks out in my mind right away is Tommaso Ciampa and Johnny Gargano. I mean, that was the plan for Takeover New Orleans, I think it was, or New York, maybe it was Brooklyn, I can't remember. And then obviously they transitioned to Adam Cole, Johnny Gargano. We've talked about it before. It's one of the best matches I've ever seen. 2 out of 3 falls destroyed me. I mean, just wonderful match. And then obviously, several years down the road when, they told the Tommaso Ciampa winning, trying to get back the title, and obviously COVID hit. They eventually went back to Johnny versus Ciampa, but at the time they had to change it up. Johnny was the bad guy, Ciampa was the good guy, so it was obviously going to be way reversed the first time. Ciampa was going to be the bad guy, Johnny was going to be a big babyface title win, obviously. That didn't happen, but he still came back to it, but just found a different way to do it. So he likes to stick to, eventually find a way to get that original plan. So I think you're right that whenever Dakota's cleared, hopefully she's cleared before WrestleMania. I feel like she'll probably be cleared by Rumble, quite frankly.
I would think so.
She's been out there walking and even running and jumping barricades for the last, month to month and a half. I feel like probably by January she's going to be cleared to wrestle. So I feel like, around that Rumble time, you're going to start getting that turn. There is one thing about this match that I did want to talk about before we move on to the next match is I'm worried about SmackDown's women's division right now. Because, for me, I look at, what's happening with the guys on Raw. Now, obviously, there's more male superstars than females, so, numbers may be a little skewed. But the fact that you had to bring in Becky because you didn't have anybody else on the SmackDown women's roster that you trusted enough to put in that spot, or at least it's what I'm assuming. I can't help but assume anything else but that. First of all, Shotzi, in and of itself, I loved Shotzi, when she was on the Indies. I thought she really had a great connection with the crowd, but since she came to WWE, it just hasn't been the same.
Right.
She's been given some big spot opportunities, and whether it was her fault or someone else's, Ronda Rousey, it hasn't gone her way. She hasn't really performed all that well. So you're already kind of one woman where you're like, okay, sure, I'll buy in, but I'm a little shaky. And then you have to add in Becky because you can't find anybody else on that SmackDown women's roster that you really think can do it. And Becky at this point is just a floater. I mean, she's on Raw, she's on NXT, she's on SmackDown, she's doing all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, right.
Which, I mean, she's phenomenal. I mean, obviously she can do whatever she wants. But are you worried about the SmackDown's women division at this point? Because I feel like outside, now that you have added Asuka to Damage Control, even with Kyrie coming back, I feel like it's Damage Control and then really not a whole lot else. Outside of your top Bianca and Charlotte.
Right, and if Bianca and Charlotte are both playing the babyface role right now, which people have never really seemed to gravitate towards Charlotte when she's in the babyface role. I think she's better as a heel anyway, but then you basically only have one babyface if you turn even Charlotte heel, or 2 I guess with Shotzi. But yeah, it kind of makes me wonder if that's where Jade's gonna go. Because I mean, obviously they could use the depth there. They have a lot of depth on the Raw women's Raw Women's roster. But yeah, no, it's and that's what almost like we almost want a good showing from the Superstar team. But yeah, no, I mean, there's not much competition out there with Damage Control getting bigger.
For sure. All right, want to move on to I think probably what's going to be the match that we unfortunately, no offense to either competitor involved, is going to be the one that we care about the least. Just because it hasn't had a whole lot of build and it just happened, right. Carlito and Santos Escobar.
Yeah.
So we'll move on to that next. It just kind of happened. I feel like it was just kind of thrown together on, like a random backstage interview, whether it was during the show, whether it was at like the WWE exclusive interview after the show, Carlito calling out Santos Escobar for Survivor Series. And it's all revolving around Rey Mysterio. Obviously, Santos turned on Rey Mysterio. I got a lot of praise online. I'm not going to lie to you. When I saw it, I didn't love it. I felt like it kind of missed the mark. It was a little confusing. It was a little convoluted. Santos's facial expressions I don't think matched the intention that he was trying to convey. It didn't connect with me. Maybe that's just me. Maybe all of you out there that watched it disagree, and that's fine. Let me know. And maybe you disagree. But for me, it didn't hit the mark. Santos is obviously much better as a bad guy. He's a terrible good guy, in my opinion. So at least that part's good. But you know who else is a much better bad guy than good guy? Carlito. I mean, right. It's not even close. I guess, where do you see this match going, and what kind of obviously they're going to be setting up Rey versus Santos at some point. But
yeah,
where are they going?
We'll obviously get to Rey Santos at some point. Rey's obviously hurt, and he's out for a little, he had surgery, I believe, and he's out for a little bit. Santos's promo was interesting, almost kind of, trying to be intimidating, almost mafia boss type thing, but it's weird because I feel like Carlito's kind of just there to stir the pot a little bit, because he comes out, SmackDown after the last PLE, after Crown Jewel, which I thought was weird too. We were watching it together, and we both noticed it, but it's like he took the brass knuckles away, but then he kind of just nonchalantly put them back, like, oh, whoops, and that's what I'm like really confused about, because he never really, I don't feel like he's truly explained his actions from Crown Jewel, which I feel like, or he needs to explain it more. I feel like that could go a long way to kind of adding a little more meat to this. Of all the long-term storytelling, I don't mind that this is kind of like a put-together match, because, it's obviously you have to fill out a card a little bit more. We only have 5 matches in total. And then really only 3 matches in total outside of the Wargames matches. So I think you have to, have some kind of match up there. Obviously, we're not seeing the U.S. title being defended, and the women's title and the World Heavyweight Championship aren't being defended. Roman's not going to be in the program. So I guess you need matches. I don't know. I think it'll be a short match. Maybe this is where we get, does LWO get involved? Who do they side with? I think that's kind of the interesting part too, because I feel like Carlito was kind of brought up to be a part of the LWO, but not really. They never really made him like a member. I feel like not officially. So it's like I feel like he's just kind of there, but he's turned the pot well. I think he pointed out the right things. I think Santos turning isn't a bad thing. I imagine they probably had a different idea in mind with some kind of match here, right before Rey had to get a surgery. But yeah, I mean, maybe it's a win for Carlito. Honestly, I'm kind of torn just because because there isn't a long-term storytelling. I could see Carlito winning here though. But it's kind of where do you go from here with them until you can get Rey back. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's a DQ. LWO gets involved on one side or the other. But yeah, no, I think it's going to be, probably that cool-down match. Get the crowd back invested again. But, it'd be nice to see Carlito win. We haven't seen him on WWE in a long time. So, bring him back, get his first win. So
sure. I just realized that I was off camera for a lot of that when I was leaning back in my chair. I do apologize for that. But, honestly, I go in the opposite direction. For me, again, I talked about it a little bit earlier. I think what Triple H does really well is he books bad guys. I mean, that's what he does. I mean, that's what he was for almost his entire career. Mm-hmm. He's really good at booking bad guys. That's what he does. That's what he's good at booking, and that's not a bad thing. That's just what he's good at booking. He's good at booking bad guys because he was a bad guy, and he's a bad guy at his core, not as a human being. I'm sure he's a very nice person, but just as a wrestling character, he's a bad guy at his core.
Right.
And so I think that he knows that when you have a big turn, you can't lose right away because then your turn is it's wasted.
Right.
So I feel like Santos has got to go over, whether it's clean or whether it's dirty somehow, whether it's LWO turns on Carlito and sides with Santos after not siding with him on SmackDown, or whether Santos just cheats somehow to win, or maybe he uses brass knuckles against Carlito as like a nice little to you, right? Like
right,
it just
yep.
something. I just feel like Santos is gonna go over. I definitely could see Carlito winning, but for me, I think that if you have Carlito win, whatever we already talked about, there's not really a whole lot of build to this, but whatever steam you had is gone. I mean,
yeah, that's a good
with
point.
Ray being gone, where do you go from there? I mean,
Right.
then it would just be Carlito being upset that he lost. At that point, I mean, there's nowhere to go. I think that if Santos steals a win, I think at least Carlito has a leg to stand on, and the LWO has a leg to stand on.
Right.
But
and DQ or interference or dirty wins, that always helps to extend the story, and that's what kind of the story needs at this point. We've given the limited build, and basically 3 weeks from, we're not even 3 weeks removed from Crown Jewel, so
right,
a dirty finish, yeah, I can see that.
fair enough. All right, so I think split. Obviously,
Yeah.
you with Carlito, me with Santos. That makes sense. All right, so moving on to the Intercontinental Championship match, in a match that I didn't think I would ever be excited for. If you had asked me 6 weeks ago, if you had told me that Gunther's next opponent would be The Miz, I'd be like, why?
I'm excited.
But you know what? I got to admit, they've done a very good job and a very interesting job of building this match. Obviously, you and I went to Raw a couple of weeks ago when this whole thing started with the kind of Miz.
See, because I think, at the end of the match before that, or where we were going before, I was like, oh, I have some time for the next segment. And then, of course, I'm hearing Gunther and Miz talking. I'm like, no! I just missed this live. And didn't mean to cut you off there, but
No,
I'm very excited for this match. I'm one of those that didn't really care for Miz early when I was in the WWE. He obviously works well. Probably one of the better guys that takes bumps out there. One of the better promos. He's always gonna get fired. He's always passionate. He's always fired up. Some promos aren't always the best storyline promo-wise, but he's always passionate, always fired up. So I think he's kind of he's like the perfect foil for Gunther right now, or Gunther, however you want to, But we'll go with Gunther. I think he's a nice foil for him. I'm just excited, just because I've been really enjoying the promos with them, with each other. And it's nice to see Miz actually in a little bit of a longer program instead of just like one-offs or Miz TV just introduce people. So it's nice to see Miz actually in the program again.
Absolutely. And again, if you told me 6 weeks ago that this would be the next program, I was but now I'm actually a little excited. And I think that you're right in terms of kind of the foil, right? I think Gunther is a machine. I mean, that's all he is. He's an absolute, no offense to Kurt Angle, but Gunther literally is a wrestling machine. As Kurt Angle was, obviously. But Gunther, it's... Kurt Angle was one type of machine, and Gunther is just a completely different type of animal, to where he just doesn't stop. I mean, it's just... And oftentimes, it's just very basic maneuvers that he's doing. Like, it's not like he's doing all these complicated suplexes and all these different throws. And no, he's just chopping you in the chest as hard as he can, powerbomb, a splash, a clothesline. Yeah. And that's all he needs. And
very simple matches, yeah.
Very simple matches, but they're all, I wouldn't say always, 98% of the time they are absolute just masterpieces. You're talking about, I can name 4 guys just off the top of my head that over the last year, the match that they had against Gunther was the best match of their entire career in WWE.
Yeah.
Ricochet, Shinsuke Nakamura, Chad Gable, Braun Strowman.
Yeah. Chad Gable, huge. And that was honestly really cool to see Chad Gable get that opportunity.
There were so
especially
many,
with just the size difference and just so many differences between the two.
So many people told me that they wanted Chad to be the guy that beat Gunther now because of how over he got. And unfortunately, because, again, I talked about it already, Triple H not that great at booking baby faces, immediately Chad Gable's lost all his momentum, which is not great. But, nonetheless, Gunther just has this wrestling ability to just make everything hurt and make it look hurt. Maybe not necessarily make it hurt. Although it probably hurt. It hurts. I'm sure I've been chopped not by Gunther but by other humans, and I cannot imagine those frying pans hitting my chest. The pain that it's experienced with normal hands, not fun. Gunther, yeah, forget it. I don't want to get chopped by that. But and then you got the Miz, and not to say that Miz isn't a good wrestler. He's been around for 20 years. You can't no matter what people say about guys like John Cena, you can't be around for 20 years and not be able to wrestle. Of course he can wrestle. Mm-hmm. Of course he's good, but he's obviously got a little bit more of a safe style. He's not going to be throwing guys around. He doesn't force his opponents to take a whole lot of difficult bumps. He's not doing your Canadian destroyers or your reverse spike ranas or dropping guys on top of their head on the apron and your suicide dives. He's not doing any of that. He's a grounded superstar. He's doing a lot of rest holds, clotheslines, punches, kicks, knees. Like he's very safe. Mm-hmm. You haven't really seen Gunther wrestle a lot of guys like that. Most of his opponents, definitely at the very least in NXT UK, were guys like Tyler Bate, where he's throwing you all around. Were guys like Jordan Devlin, who's obviously JD McDonough now. Guys like Pete Dunne. Guys like Ilya Dragunov, who I'm not going to talk about it on the podcast here, but there will be podcasts in the future where I basically just pour as much adulation onto that man as I possibly can. I think he's a top 5 wrestler on planet Earth. You can fight me if you want to. I don't care. He's gonna be a world champion someday, unless obviously all goes wrong with his career. If he gets injured, or obviously you never know with people. But regardless, point being, it's gonna be interesting the dynamic between the Miz and Gunther. And one thing about the Miz is obviously in his career he's been in matches where he's had to take some beatings. Not very many, but he's been in a couple. He's been in an I Quit match with John Cena where he's had to take some beatings. Although it was basically a 2-on-1 handicap match, so Miz didn't actually take all that much punishment.
Right.
I'm trying to think. I don't think he's been in a Hell in a Cell match, or he's been in a couple of steel cage matches. But quite frankly, he hasn't really been in a whole lot of matches where he's taking a whole lot of crazy bumps. I think he's been in one Money in the Bank match, maybe. A ladder match when he was IC champ, a couple times here and there. But he hasn't.
That was earlier in his career.
Earlier in his career, but especially recently, he's not, like you mentioned, he hasn't been in a lot of these programs that he's had to really, stretch himself physically. Yeah. And if there's a wrestler on earth that's going to make you stretch yourself physically and is going to bring the best out of you, it's Gunther. And so I'm really intrigued to see how Miz is going to handle the rapid fire offense that Gunther brings, the just absolute brutality. And I don't know if his chest is going to be okay by the time
I don't think it's
over. Because, if any of you have not seen Gunther wrestle, my favorite thing that he does, and he doesn't do it every match. I think he should do it every match because it's just the freaking best. He just puts somebody on the top of the top rope, on their back, and he just stretches them out and he just hits them in the chest just over and over again. And it just you just sit there and you're just oh God, no!
And that's what made his matches with Sheamus so fun last year. The triple threat with him and Drew, but the match they had together, those are probably two of the best matches all of last year.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And probably, quite frankly, of the last handful of years, they were phenomenal.
Yeah. So I think it's just very interesting to see. I don't by any stretch of me think Miz is going to win. Miz does something very good, especially at this stage in his career, almost kind of like Cena in a sense. He knows how to put guys over. He knows how to be a good promo. He knows how to go toe-to-toe with a promo with guys. The promos between these two have been really good, getting better every week. He is there to put Gunther over, even though Gunther doesn't really need to go much more over. Yeah. But it's, Gunther just needs to keep extending his reign. Who knows how long he can go. I don't want to say it's been a better long reign than the guy that won't be named in this podcast today. But it's
not quite
interesting for me to also to see Gunther. I knew about him from NXT UK. Didn't always watch a lot of his matches, but you knew he was, and that's when he was Walter. The whole another podcast there is like all these name changes when they hit the main roster thing.
It gets ridiculous.
But he's
that's why I keep calling her Io Shirai, guys, just so you're aware.
he's just, you look at him and he's a force. You don't have to even know much about him, and you know he's a force. So I'm very intrigued to see how this match goes. The whole it's a long match. I think it can be kind of an endurance match. I don't feel, again, Miz is going to win this. Gunther is my pick for sure, but I'd like to hedge a bet towards Miz just because I wouldn't mind seeing Miz have the Intercontinental title, and I think that's what's great. Also, too, is like you have a guy that's always claimed to make the IC title the most prestigious title. Like that's always been his claim, and that's kind of how their beef kind of started. And Gunther's like, I am making this prestigious my own way, so I think that's really cool. And I don't know if you've noticed at all that Gunther has kind of recently started calling it the IC heavyweight title.
Yes.
And I think that's
very subtle difference.
Hasn't
there.
really been talked about a lot in the wrestling world, I don't feel. But I think that's nice because hopefully that's kind of taken that out of everybody's mind of not being a secondary title. I don't think it should. I mean, many great wrestlers have held the IC title throughout wrestling. It is almost kind of a stepping stone to the world titles, but it's a big title. It's a big deal when you get this title. Who knows? Maybe Gunther gets 2,000 days with this title.
I mean, I hope not because there's certain things I want to see. So I hope not. But yeah, me too. Gunther, obviously, that's my pick. I don't think Miz is the guy. I think at this point, with these long title reigns, I don't know if you've met Roman before, the guy who will not be named. I don't know why we won't name him. But sorry, I already broke the rule.
Okay.
But I think with you got a guy like that, and then obviously with Gunther's reign. Even with the tag titles when the Usos had it, for that long, whoever beats them, it's a huge deal.
Right.
And I don't think Miz needs it. I think at this point, Miz is 2-time Grand Slam champion. He says it in every promo. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer, no matter if he retired today. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer. There's no question about it. He's one of the best characters, and he's one of just the most, longevity-wise, one of the best wrestlers of all time, which is just bonkers to say. But it is true. But I don't think he needs it. I also would, no offense to the Miz, but I would honestly be a little upset if after all this time it was him to win it,
right?
And him to beat, because I think you can just use that to because I think what the IC title should be, and it doesn't have to happen literally every title change, but the majority of title reigns should be a guy who is going to take the next step. And then the Intercontinental Champion also takes that next step to world title status. Mm-hmm. I think clearly that's what you're going to do with Gunther. But if The Miz were to win the IC title,
it doesn't do anything.
It doesn't do anything for The Miz, quite frankly. He's fine no matter what you have him do.
Right.
I think, I'm going to say it again. I think, God, I want Ilya to be the guy that beats Gunther so bad. Because look.
And that calls back to history between those two. And NXT UK.
I know. I think I said this to you the other week. Gunther has been, or Walter/Gunther has been in WWE or NXT UK for the last 5 years. There is only one man who has ever beaten him, ever, and that is Ilya Dragunov. So you have hit that crazy composing Russian music hit, at one of these big pay-per-views, and it's on. Like, you're going to see a match that, makes you uncomfortable. Because it's a guy who's willing to just hurt somebody to no end versus a guy that's willing to hurt himself to no end. And it's a perfect storm of just pain and misery. I don't know if you've watched those matches. I know you didn't watch a lot of NXT UK.
Just clips here and
there. They did a takeover match a few years ago. It's not, to me, some people think that it's better than the first one. And I understand why, because there's not quite as much, visceral pain in the second one than the first one, but my goodness gracious, the first one, you sit there and you almost you're like, is this even a wrestling match anymore? They're just hitting each other as hard as they can. And I'm not even talking you've seen like Sheamus and Gunther hitting each other as hard as they could. It's like 10 levels beyond that, to where like literally like their bodies don't work and they're still just hitting each other and they can't stand up literally because they've hit each other so many times.
Sounds like we need an I Quit match between those
It's unbelievable. Yeah. Like that. I want to see that again. I watched the second match like 2 weeks ago. I was bored and I just thought about it. I put it on and I'm like, oh, it's so good. Like, that's the guy I want to beat, Gunther. I don't know. It's probably not going to happen because Ilya's NXT champ right now. I think there's a world where it could happen. He's fighting Baron Corbin. Maybe he's the guy that's going to take the NXT title off him. Who knows? But, you know, I would just like to see that be the guy, ideally. If not, then obviously somebody like Chad Gable. Even, you know, my NXT bias, Johnny Gargano, somebody like that. I think it would make them better. And then obviously Gunther can then move on to the world title spot. But I think Gunther's the obvious pick.
Yeah, no, I think like what you're saying, the winner needs to be a winner that's going to be elevated, and maybe that, you know, not necessarily have to have a long run with it, but it's like you've arrived now. So it's like kind of like who's that next person that's arrived? Like we have some people out there that have like organically arrived with the crowd, like LA Knight, but I don't even know if like he's even that. I don't think he's that right guy even, just because of he might be one of those. He never needs a title, and he's gonna be awesome in whatever match he kind of does.
Sure.
But yeah, so it's, you know, I think that's, you know, an interesting thought. Is like, is there anybody on the main rosters right now that's even worthy of it?
And no, and that's why I think it should be Ilya, because quite frankly, I don't think there's anybody, at least on Raw, that I would sit there and think, yeah, I could definitely buy in, other than maybe Chad Gable. But at this point, I don't think they're gonna do it. I mean, I think they had their shot and they didn't take it. I think you're gonna have to build up somebody else. Maybe it's Sammy. I'd love to see it. Sammy or Jay Uso. I think that would be good. Maybe one of those guys, because you're not necessarily making them, because obviously I think they're both made men. They're both very popular. Right. They're both, you know, at the top of their game in every respect. Sammy's obviously been IC champ 3 or 4 times before. Mm-hmm. Jay hasn't. But I think that you can really, I think you could tell a great, I mean, who wouldn't want to see a Sami Zayn versus Gunther match? I sure would. It'd be fun. But, you know, other than that, I mean, you're taking a main event guy and putting him in that spot. I don't think you've got anybody that's, like, fighting from underneath that's coming up right now. I mean, you know, there's all these rumors about, you know, guys coming from AEW or from New Japan. Right. Who the heck knows? But I don't see anybody beating Gunther right now. And so that's why I think it should be somebody from NXT. It should be Ilya Dragunov. That's my opinion. But you guys let me know in the comments if you agree or if you even know who that is, because a lot of people don't watch NXT. So, you know, let me know. Next, I think it's the last non-Wargames match of the card, and that will be a match again that seems a bit haphazardly thrown together, but it's gotten a little bit better over the last couple of weeks in terms of build. Zoey Stark versus Rhea Ripley for the Women's World title. I mean, I'll start with this one. I think, obviously, Rhea's going over. I don't think Zoey has much of a chance. I like that they believed in Zoey enough to give her this opportunity so early. Yes. I do like that, but I just think that you know, the big money match, and we'll get into this here in a little bit because I'll obviously ask you what your opinion is on this. We've already talked about her a little bit, but I think that the big money match at Mania is Jade versus Rhea. I don't want Jade to be on Raw because I think Raw has enough.
Yes.
But unless you're putting the title on Charlotte again, which please don't. But, you know, like, just for the purposes of this, please don't. Like, the big money match is Jade versus Rhea right now. No offense to Io Sky. It's not even that I wouldn't want to see that match. But I think her story is elsewhere, as we've already discussed today. Right. I think her story is with Bayley or with somebody else in Damage Control, or with all of Damage Control at WrestleMania, whether she has the title or not. Yep. I think that's where they're going, and if that's the story you're telling, Jade does not obviously fit in there unless you're going to have her join Damage Control for some reason, which please don't. But I think the big money match at Mania is Rhea versus Jade, and so I think, I mean, I
kind of like have to do with what you're doing with Roman right now is put in the filler matches. Because, I mean, yeah, there's no one that's really the force outside of, like, a Becky or a Charlotte or Bianca. and you've been down the road with all three
Nia
of them.
Jax is the irresistible force.
Right, but and eventually we're gonna probably get that. That's probably like a Rumble or something match, But eventually I think we're gonna do that. We're gonna, it was what it was a 4-way, 5-way match at Crown Jewel.
5-way.
So and I think, and that's why Zoe kind of gets her turn first, is because she kind of argued, hey, I was right there at the end where I could have almost won it, and they kind of painted that picture a little bit. So I think she's gonna eventually kind of probably knock each of those 4 women off. Building towards a WrestleMania match with whatever. Maybe they wait for Jade to Rumble and bring Jade out at Rumble. Yep. She wins Women's Rumble, and there we go. Easy story. And I think that's what's nice is right now in WWE as a whole is the stories aren't super complicated, and they don't need to be super complicated.
Wrestling isn't hard.
No.
It's really not.
And they're telling good stories. They're starting to pick up more stories. With
storytelling wrestling, not physical wrestling. That's very hard.
Yes.
So we're aware.
The storytelling, we're finally getting, honestly, we just had the Bloodline arc and no really other arc for a long time. Yeah. Then we get the Judgment Day arc. Now that we've got 2 big factions, Triple H, Staple again, or Triple, Staple again right there with them. Now we're finding other storylines. We're finding storylines for people within those factions, which is always good, because then you can't, you got to keep those individual wrestlers doing something at the same time, especially when you got male and female in the same faction. But yeah, I think it's always just a stepping stone. The next PLA will probably be Raquel, even though they think they've been down that road. Then Nia probably at Rumble or yeah.
Yeah, I think Triple H again, like I mentioned, is doing a really good job with your big time heel champs, having just a stranglehold on the title, and then you're going to build up to have a big time win, and that win elevates whoever that person is. That's the whole point of what heels are. Yep. Heels are, they cheat, they win, they keep winning, no one can stop them. Big time babyface comes along, finally triumphs on a big stage, whether it's SummerSlam, WrestleMania, Crown Jewel, who cares, whatever it is, and then that's your story, right? And then that, eventually another big time heel comes along, takes it off that babyface, and the cycle repeats over and over and over again. And so Rhea is, I don't remember if I said it on camera to you or off camera, but at some point during this evening, I said that we all knew what Rhea Ripley could be before she ever had a WrestleMania main event, before she ever won last year's Rumble. Like, that, there was no doubt in anybody's mind. And I think when they did Charlotte versus Rhea the first time for the NXT Women's Championship at WrestleMania, when Rhea lost, we all were like, absolutely not. Like, this is not okay. This is the one woman you can't do this to, because out of everybody that's come up, out of everybody that we've seen, she is going to be a absolute force.
And now she is.
And thank goodness for Triple H for that, because I swear to you, if it was up to Vince McMahon, Gunther would be fired and Rhea Ripley would be wrestling on Main Event every week. Like, have you heard that story about Vince McMahon and Gunther?
No, I haven't.
So, Gunther came up and wrestled a match on SmackDown, I think, and then cut one of Gunther's promos to introduce himself. My name is Gunther. I am the ring general. I'm here to keep the rings, this match sacred. This sport is supposed to be sacred, and I'm here to uphold the classic stuff, right? That he always said. When he came back into the locker room, Vince apparently was like, I don't get it. I don't understand why this guy's so, everybody thinks he's so important. And he was literally going to have him be a comedy character or not book him at all. This is Gunther we're talking about. This is the longest reigning, most dominant Intercontinental Champion ever that Vince went, I don't get it. Like, when I say Triple H is the best thing to happen to WWE in a long, long time, no matter how much criticism I'm giving him here in terms of how he books babyfaces, I mean it, guys. Like, there are just so many things that would never have happened, including Sammy being in the Bloodline, which was literally what got my wife into wrestling. That's how good that stuff was, is her going, this is so much fun. This is hilarious. This is good stuff. Yes, it is. Isn't it wonderful? Yes. Like, anyway, I'm getting off track here, but back to Rhea Ripley. I don't know how I got off on a Bloodline tangent with talking about Rhea Ripley. But, no, dominant heel champ. I mean, obviously, I think she's retaining here. And again, I think the big money match is going to be Jade versus Rhea at Mania. Obviously, they may go in a different direction. If you like what we talked about, I think Raw has enough superstars, female superstars that are, kind of on the up and up at this point. I mean, they just had a fatal 4-way to crown the number 1 contender for the NXT Women's Tag Team Championships, and they were all Raw tag teams. So like they've got enough women to figure it out. And on the SmackDown side, other than Zelina, right?
And
I can't even.
Who is it with AJ Styles and who's with? OC?
Oh yeah, Michin, right? Michin.
Yeah.
So other than those two, who else is even a woman on the SmackDown roster at the moment? Like I'm other than Damage Control, obviously, and then the Wargames. I'm blanking. Like there's and that's no offense to anybody. Like it's important that I might be forgetting, but genuinely I am at a loss. And that's not whoever I'm forgetting's fault, because I'm sure there is somebody. Somebody's going to be like, oh, Alicia Fox. It's not Alicia Fox, but somebody is going to be like, oh, right, yeah, right. So it's going to be somebody that I'm not aware of. But I think that she should just depth-wise go to SmackDown, but that would mean that she's fighting Charlotte, and nobody wants. I mean, obviously that would be a fun match, but like, does anybody want to see Charlotte be champion again right now?
The only thing I want...
Charlotte wants to see Charlotte be champion again, I'm sure, but I don't even know if her daddy wants to see her be champion at this point.
Well, he doesn't count anymore since he's with AEW.
That's true, yeah, he doesn't.
The only reason I want to see Charlotte win the title a couple more times is just so she can beat her dad's record.
I mean, yeah, eventually, but I think the breakneck pace at which she's doing it's driving all of us a little nuts at this point.
But I think that would be cool. Second generation, breaking your dad's record of titles and stuff. It's,
yeah.
I think.
No, I think eventually they're going to do that.
Wrestling should have that, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd say that, and again, no offense to Ric Flair, but I would say that he probably has some influence in that of like nobody's breaking my record except for somebody in my own dang family.
I'm sure.
Like I'm sure that's probably part of it as well. But that would be a big money match. Obviously, I would completely understand if that's what they chose to do. I just don't really care to see Charlotte win another belt, because at this point you're just doing it at the expense of the younger women, not the younger women necessarily, but like the more up and coming women that are trying to make names for themselves. Like Io Sky. I don't want to see Charlotte beat Io Sky at this point. Charlotte doesn't need to beat Io Sky. Io Sky needs to beat Charlotte, which she has done a couple times.
Yes.
But yeah, so again, the easy one, I think, out of all the matches here, I think the easiest anyways.
Yes.
Other than maybe Gunther. I mean, that's pretty clear. Too.
Yeah.
But Rhea's going over for sure.
Yeah, the two title matches, I think they're gonna retain. I'd be shocked.
Oh yeah. I mean, I would be very happy for Zoe for sure, because I think she's really good. But definitely shocked for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Last match of the night, and this is the biggest one with the most moving parts, with the most things we're going to talk about. So buckle up at home. The men's Wargames match. Now, this is going to come out on Friday, the Friday before Survivor Series. Okay. So hopefully you guys will have all seen Monday Night Raw, but at this point it is only a day old, so I am going to be nice and say if you have not seen Monday Night Raw, pause the video, go watch at least the last 3.5 minutes of the show, and then come back and watch what I'm about to say, because spoilers are happening.
Fair enough.
I'm giving you ample time, folks at home.
Or all the Instagram posts, all the videos.
Exactly.
There's been plenty of stuff.
If you're still here, that means that you are either wanting spoilers because you're weird or you've seen it already. Wargames is now 5-on-5 for the men. Okay, this is something that you and I discussed, a little while ago, thinking that was probably going to be the case. I even told my wife several weeks ago, like, hey, Wargames is probably going to be 5-on-5, at least for the guys. Because Drew is probably going to be the 5th member at this point. It seemed like it was going that way, and sure enough, it happened.
Yep.
And so not the entire premise. And some of the premise of Monday Night Raw was the other team finding a 5th partner.
And going back to Drew really quick before we go into more,
yeah.
And I'm going to pose one more question for you.
Please do.
But with Drew, I like how he came out Monday and said, I'm not joining Judgment Day, which I'm glad. They don't need another member, especially since they just added JD. But he's like, I've got this opportunity in a steel cage with Jay.
Yeah.
And maybe we get a program with those two after this. I don't know. We can discuss that more. But I thought that was a nice touch where it's like keeps Drew on his path, keeps him like tweenish heel, but most he's pretty much a heel right now. But I like that little nice touch. Is like it's kind of like a not necessarily. I don't even know if I want to use a word that he respects Judgment Day, but he's like, I have an opportunity here. Why wouldn't I take it? So I like that from that aspect. And I think that's a big wild card in this whole match because could he go overboard and make Judgment Day lose this? And obviously we know the fifth member of the other side here with it being Randy Orton.
Yes.
Do you have anything that you could, since we didn't actually physically see Randy Orton come out on Raw, do you think they could swerve us and pull out CM Punk? It is in Chicago.
Have to ask. CM Punk is one of my heroes in life. Genuinely. He is one of the main reasons I stayed watching wrestling through my teenage years. I am straight edge myself. I do not drink. I do not smoke. I don't do drugs. I don't even really, unless I am forced to take prescription medications for anything. Genuinely, he is a huge influence on my life. And I think that I needed to say that because the next thing I'm going to say is going to be very unkind to CM Punk. I think that he has become a poison of our industry. I think that unfortunately, no matter how much I admire the lifestyle, no matter how much he has influenced me from childhood into my teenage years, no matter how much I believed in him, no matter how much I adored him, and no matter how much I wanted him to win every single match that he was in. It's like Terrell Owens. Are you familiar with Terrell Owens?
Oh, yes.
Okay. He had problems everywhere he went. Problems with teammates, problems with coaches, problems with GMs, whatever it was. And look, you know what? He may have had just unlucky. He had 4 bad groups of people he was dealing with. But quite frankly, if you're in all these different places and there's problems, you might want to look yourself in the mirror and figure out if you're the problem or not.
Yes.
And I think at this point, it's pretty clear that CM Punk's been the problem. Now, that's not to say that WWE was all his fault, because I don't think it was. I think really he got really mistreated, and like the fact that he had a staph infection and it wasn't treated, and he had a concussion and they kept making him wrestle and all these different, like, that's not cool. Like, that's obviously, obviously he could have had better attitude with things or handled some things differently, but at the end of the day, I would still put WWE at fault there. But everything that happened in AEW, quite frankly, I think is on CM Punk. And that's a shame, because CM Punk still, the name is there. I mean, you're talking about
resounds.
He's still so popular. He's still so. I mean, if his music hit, the world would go ballistic if he came out. And I understand that there's a business side to this, and the money talks, money's green no matter who's making it. But here's the thing. I think that the reason why they did what they did on Monday, and for those of you who didn't see it, as he mentioned, Randy Orton did not physically come out of the building. By the way, I told, again, I'm shouting at my wife here, she will back this up so you can ask her when we're off camera. Literally, I told her probably 4 or 5 days ago that he would say something along the lines of, this isn't about championships, this isn't about war, this is about legacy. I literally said that that's what Cody Rhodes would say, and that's how we would announce it. He didn't say that, but he did say, I have a legacy with this man, so I'm like, see, it's sort of what I said.
Yes.
But so he said everything about Randy, other than him being the Viper. That's basically it. Apex Predator, he said obviously,
called back pretty much everything.
Everything, right. So, yeah, it's Randy Orton, and I think the reason why they did that, actually, I'm pretty sure, I feel like I'm almost 100% certain
I would agree.
is because if they didn't do that, and they did what they did at NXT TakeOver a few years ago, and they said, okay, well, this team needs one more member. We don't know if they're going to show up until the day of the show. They're not in the cage. Randy Orton's music hits. when it's the time for the last person to come out. If you waited that long in Chicago for a mystery opponent to come out when CM Punk might come back to WWE, you are asking for a riot when Randy Orton's music hits.
Yes.
And it is not Randy Orton's fault in any way, shape, or form. So I think they had no choice but to do it the way they did it. Now, obviously, they could have had, I guess, Randy come out and do something.
But my initial reaction to it was like, I wanted to see it. We haven't seen him forever. I won't open the full can of worms here. I enjoyed RK Bro.
I very much
Matt Riddle isn't with WWE anymore, and I'm not surprised, honestly, there. No, again, another discussion for another time. But I enjoyed that, and I feel like they were starting to position Randy to be like the next challenger to Roman before Randy got hurt.
And then they transitioned to make it Riddle after that.
Right, and I think that would have been great. Would have called back to so many old storylines back when they were in, when Orton was a heel and Roman was the face and stuff. You could have so much fun with that storyline. So I hope they can kind of somehow get back to that now. But yeah, I'm excited for Orton back because, again, I think that tag team was just hitting their stride just as he got injured.
Yep.
They had, I think there were a ton of plans in place, which they obviously did a great job of pivoting and everything. The whole Sami Zayn storyline, which basically peak bloodline. So that all alone, I'm excited just seeing him back. And we haven't even talked about the match yet.
No. There's still a match to talk about, folks. Yeah. I keep going off camera.
And to now finally get Orton and Rhodes together. Mm-hmm. I've been in and out of WWE, but I always enjoyed WWE when there was legacy, because I always thought it was really cool how Orton was kind of the mentee with Triple H, but then he reversed the role and took in DiBiase and Cody Rhodes, and that was a fun faction for me to watch. I enjoyed watching them, and now we get to pair Orton and Rhodes together in a match, in a Wargames match of all matches.
Which is his daddy's match.
Yep.
Well, Cody's daddy's match.
Yeah. He was
Cowboy Bob Orton had nothing to do with Wargames.
Yeah.
At least not that I know of.
I don't think so. But, so many fun, just little Easter eggs or nuances or however you want to position that, that's just fun. So to see them and be able to bring in the ring together for Orton to return, love it.
I want to. First of all, I agree with everything you said. Second of all, who wants to see Randy Orton do a Cody cutter, but basically have it be an RKO? Because that would be the greatest thing that I've ever seen.
I want to see them do each other's
Granted,
moves.
his back's probably not good enough to do that at this point, but I would still like to see it. That would be so fun.
I would love to see
Cody just does a Cody cutter on one of the guys, and Randy goes, "Oh, really?" And then he does one. Oh my God, I'd pee. That'd be great.
I think we're in for a long Wargames match.
Oh my God, are we?
Because all these guys can all take a beating. Yeah. JD's probably going to take the most. JD's probably going to be the first one out.
That is, well maybe. But I was going to say, that is... So JD, the way he wrestles, is a discussion for a whole nother time. I've said this to my wife a few times. I think if he's wrestling the way he wrestles right now, he's not going to last 5 years. I mean, he's just throwing himself around like a rag doll. It's ridiculous. But anyway, go ahead.
And when we were at Raw a few weeks ago here in Greenville, JD and Rollins put on a great match.
He was my... So I watched a lot of NXT UK, obviously. I'm very familiar with a lot of the wrestlers there. He was my second favorite character. The matches that he was putting on, I liked the just merciless heel persona of the Irish Ace, where he would just attack people before matches and beat them unconscious, and then he'd throw them in the ring and force the ref to ring the bell, and then beat them up some more for another 5 or 10 minutes, and then pin them. Wonderful stuff. It was different. And he obviously had really fun matches with Pete Dunne and Finn Balor, but unfortunately, he came up on the losing end of all those matches, and so he didn't get the titles or the recognition, and then he got to NXT, and Kevin Owens made fun of him a whole bunch, and that was basically it. That's really all he did. He just, why do you talk like that? You're so weird. Like, that's basically how it ended up, and now he's on the main roster. Yeah. So, I like JD McDonough, Jordan Devlin, as he used to be called a lot. In terms of the match, obviously, like, I agree, it's going to be a long one. It's going to be a slog. My question is, are they going to do what they did with Kevin Owens, like I mentioned a few years ago? Kevin Owens was the mystery partner that I talked about that they ended up getting in the end, which was such a huge pop. I loved that. I love that moment. It's one of my favorite moments in recent history. And you could tell, like, he missed being in NXT. He missed that crowd.
Yes.
He was into it. But I wonder if they're going to do the same thing with Randy. Do they pull a swerve? I think until they see Randy, that crowd in Chicago is going to still have a sliver of hope that CM Punk's going to come out, this might be a controversial statement. And I'm probably going to be wrong. But if WWE thinks it's going to be that bad, I would not be surprised if they put the men's War Games match on first. And just, here's Randy. Sorry, CM Punk's not coming out. Right away. But like, immediately quell it. Like, no, he's not coming. No.
Do that the other way around, though. It's like, if you put that first and say, CM Punk isn't in this match, I think you could do the other way around, though, too, where people are like, oh, but we still have the rest of this event to maybe see CM Punk.
That's fair. That is true.
Devil's advocate.
No. That I for sure. I think the only other way that I can see CM Punk coming back is Shinsuke's been doing this weird thing where he's like he was like kind of like what Aleister Black was doing, or Malachi Black now a few years ago. He was like, come knock on my door. Like, yeah. So Shinsuke, I think that there's an opportunity there for you to have a nice NXT call-up or a debut, and I think it's probably just going to be an NXT call-up, quite frankly.
But they've been sprinkling phrases and ideas that call back to Punk
100%.
For 2 months now.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Rollins, Shinsuke.
so here we'll get into this at least a little bit, just because I think I need to make my stance clear. I do not want CM Punk back in WWE. Again, I've already talked about how much he's meant to me in my life and how much of a role model he was for me. But at the end of the day, I am somebody that prides myself on being kind and being understanding with others and being patient with others. And he's none of those things, as far as I can tell. Now, he may not necessarily be unkind, generally speaking. I'm sure when he's with fans, I'm sure when he's with his family, he's a perfectly fine person. But my goodness, when it comes to wrestling politics, if it's not absolutely perfect, he loses his ever-loving mind.
Yes.
And I don't understand that. He's a phenomenal personality and talent. I'm going to say has ever. Plenty have. But now at this point, nobody is denying how good CM Punk is at this point. You might think he's a little overrated, but nobody's going to deny that he's good to great, if not excellent.
Yes. And he's a draw. He's still a draw.
He's a draw. And so I understand the thought of, look, wouldn't you want to see CM Punk versus Seth Rollins? Of course I would. Wouldn't you want to see CM Punk versus Gunther? Of course I would. I'd want to see all of them, but the problem is with the matches comes his mouth when he's backstage. And those two things can't be separated, and to me it's not worth... The morale in the locker room is better than it's been in years. Mm-hmm. You really want to add Punk to that? Yeah. And just like literally throwing a pipe bomb into a hole, yeah. And just blowing up fish in a barrel at that point. I don't want it to happen unless there's some zero flipping tolerance. Yeah. You get into anything, you're gone. Yeah. No questions asked, and we're gonna go out on TV and we're gonna tell everybody that you took your ball and went home, and you're just gonna have to freaking deal with it. That millions of people aren't gonna respect you. Yeah. Millions of people already don't respect him, but there's enough people still that are like, come on. But if it happens again,
right. And I'm with you. I don't think it's, and I don't think, and my reason isn't even as deep. I don't think it was a good move for WWE. Obviously, because he's going to cost money. He would probably end up being one of the highest paid, if not the highest paid person on that roster. And if the WWE is going after, they've brought in Jade. She couldn't have been cheap. They're going after, MJF supposedly,
No, they're not.
I doubt they go after him, but
I think it is all a lie, and MJF is signed to AEW for like 5 more years. I promise you. I swear to God, I think it's a.
Him, Ospreay's obviously now with AEW too, but
that broke my heart. Yeah.
Those two names and other names that are kind of getting up close to end of their deals at AEW or New Japan, they still haven't. Nothing's been announced if they've re-signed Drew yet. There's other big names in the company right now that they haven't technically re-signed. They have another year to re-sign, but it's like, if you really want to, just from a money standpoint, supposedly you aren't making a lot of money right now. Supposedly.
More money than they've ever made, apparently.
But layoffs and stuff. But that aside, if you're pursuing all these free agents, you're trying to keep your own free agents, why would you want to put money into CM Punk? Because that's just going to eliminate half the money that you have to go get the rest of these people you want to get.
Yeah.
So I think just even from just a money standpoint, I don't think it's a great move for AE. Again, and I think you're right too on the poison to the locker room. I don't, it might be, roses and butterflies for 2 months, but how quickly is that going to come?
Yeah, and then Seth says something on Twitter, and then he, starts, throwing his dog at people.
Yeah,
like,
so
who knows what's going to happen.
Yeah, so I think we both agree. We don't think we'll see a CM Punk.
I don't think so.
Saturday or Raw after.
At the very least, we hope not.
Yeah, we hope not.
There's always that part in our brain that's like, oh God, is WWE going to be that dumb and do it? I don't think he's there.
No, and again, I think going back, we've talked about Triple H a lot and what he's done, and basically 2.5 years now. I don't think he wants to go down that road, just because they didn't. Maybe they're on better terms than they were a few years ago, but I just don't think if it was Vince still control, I think it'd be happening.
Fair enough. All right. Well, we spent this whole time talking about this match. We haven't talked about the match. I'll start with you, obviously, Daniel. Again, by the way, I'll just say this. Thank you so much for doing this. This is awesome. And obviously, we're going to do it again unless you hate me, which is fair. I'm horrible. But who do you have going over?
I didn't say to myself, well, let me make this decision until we were talking about the match. And I'm still just like, I don't know. Because I think you could go down so many roads with what do you do with Rhodes and Orton?
Play on words for the win.
I think in a way you have a wild card in Drew for Judgment Day. Does he go overboard with Jay? Just focus on Jay, and that costs him. That costs Judgment Day the match. JD's probably the weakest link in terms of wrestling with everybody else as far as experience with everybody else that's in that ring. So he's probably going to be an easy target. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if he's first man out for Judgment Day, just because he's the one that's going to take a beating.
Yeah.
I think the wild card outside of Orton and Rhodes is Jay. Yes, he's main event Jay. You were talking about, which I didn't think about earlier, Gunther. Where's Gunther going to go down? I think Jay or even Sammy. But I think to me, there's so many volatile pieces in Team Rhodes to where, yes, they can all work together, but there's a lot of bad blood between a lot of those members.
Basically everybody and Seth.
Yeah. Everybody, Seth is a weird wild card, I think, in that team. I thought it was actually interesting how, because it was Rollins that reached out to Rhodes and said, hey, we have to do this together. This is the one time we're going to do this. I don't want to, but I will. Mm-hmm. So I think that all together, the common goal, I think, will unite them. But I think it's going to be Judgment Day. I know we were talking about the 50-50 earlier, but I think we're going to see, either I'm going to be wrong in the women's, or we're going to see both heel factions win. I think the only thing I can think of is Priest just not wanting anything to do with Judgment Day halfway through this match, and he just walks out.
Well, if he walks out, they lose. That's how that. That's the rules of the rules of the Wargames matches. If you leave the cage, your team loses. So.
Right. So it's maybe not that drastic, but I could see Priest just kind of just not caring.
Had enough.
And just
And that's another rumor that's gone around, is that essentially they're going to replace Damian Priest with Drew. And they're just going to do like basically a 1-for-1 swap, and Damian's going to go off and do his own thing, and then Drew's going to join Judgment Day and try and be the leader. And then that'll be your dynamic, and then maybe they'll do him in Finn at Mania or something.
And he still has the cash. Not that we should cash in during the match, but which again that could be an added element. So it's. I think that. And I kind of wonder about Orton and Rhodes. Does Orton play ball for a while, then he turns to what we are used to seeing him as and being the heel, and RKO's Rhodes and leaves him there.
Yep.
For Judgment Day to pin. I think the match could go a lot of different ways. I think you can branch off a lot of big storylines. But I think whatever this match, whoever wins this match, this has to sever a lot of storylines, so everybody on Team Rhodes can go their own way out of Judgment Day.
Absolutely.
And then I think that's kind of why I lean towards Judgment Day winning, because I think because we need to split off these guys to other storylines.
Yeah, for sure. The four of them have been feuding with Judgment Day for 13 years at this point. It's ridiculous how long it's been. But look, there was no long-term storytelling, it felt like, under Vince. And now it's only long-term storytelling with Triple H. And I'd much rather have only long-term storytelling, because, my goodness, if it ever goes back to the way it was, I'm never watching wrestling again. I can't do it anymore. But yeah, it's difficult for me as well, for all the reasons you mentioned. I think that there's so many different ways that you can go here. I think that there's all different stories that you can tell. But the story, I think, has always been Cody. Yes. I think it will be Cody at WrestleMania 40. I don't think that there's any other match that makes any sense at this point based on what WWE is telling you. He even was on SmackDown last week and helped LA Knight fend off the Bloodline for reasons that we only can comprehend, because the follow-up was Cody going, sorry, and then he left. Like, that was literally the follow-up. You think I'm exaggerating. Literally, Nick Aldis said, you need to leave, and he went, I'm sorry, and then he left. Like, that's literally what happened. I'm not exaggerating to be a child, but I think that you actually mentioned what I believe is going to happen. I think that you're going to get 3/4 to 95% of the way into the match, and the danger noodle that is Randy Orton is going to RKO Cody Rhodes and just stand over his body while Finn Balor, sure, why not? Give Finn something. Yeah, I like Finn. Give Finn something.
Finn hasn't got anything for a while.
Give him some nice things. Have Finn get the pin. It even rhymes, guys. Give him the win and the pin, and it's Finn. It all rhymes. It's meant to be. I swear to God, I'm not doing that on purpose. Anyway, but sure. Let's have Finn Balor pin Cody Rhodes. Cody Rhodes gets a very rare pin, defeat, and it's going to mean a lot, because it's Randy that cost Cody again. And then that's your feud for, 2 months or whatever.
You could have that feud 5 different ways probably for WrestleMania.
But the problem is there's another part of me that's like, God, I want to wait to have that. Like, wouldn't you just love to have that be Cody's first feud as champion? Him fight Randy, because Randy's not going to beat him. The last person before Cody Rhodes was fired and left WWE, the last match he had was a one-on-one match against Randy Orton. And Randy Orton RKO'd him and won, and that cost Cody Rhodes his job. And then Goldust fought Randy the next week to try and get him back, and he lost. And so we never saw Cody again until he bleached his hair blonde and was woeing all the time, right? Yeah. So, like he is right now. So I think that's always the story. And so I think that, they're probably going to do a Randy Orton turn immediately. Because let's face it, Randy Orton is as good of a babyface for about one night at this point in his career. Because no one's good. He's not an underdog. Underdog. That's not a word. Underdog. Because I'm tired. I've been recording for a long time. He's not an underdog. He's not fighting from underneath. He's not. What does he have to prove? Right? Now, obviously, when he was with Riddle, much different reasons of why he was a good guy. He was a good guy because everybody loved Riddle so much, and he was there being like, oh, this crazy kid. Like, that's funny. But on his own, there's no reason for him to be a good guy at this point in his career. None. Zero. Right. He should just be the Viper, the Snake, the Apex Predator. I'm going to RKO you and take all the good things in the world.
Yes.
Like, that's the only reason he should be there. Especially considering doctors have told him he shouldn't be wrestling anymore. He really shouldn't be, Wargames. Good luck, Randy. Try and not,
and
die.
And that's why I think, like you're saying, whether they either have him in the cage or bring him out as the last person. He'll probably be the last person in the cage for Team Rhodes.
So I've changed my mind. Here's what I think is going to happen, and this is my final answer. So here's everything. Everything at once. And you can grade me on accuracy. It's going to be a 2.5%, but we're gonna go with it anyway. Right? I think that Randy Orton is not going to come out in the cage. I think they're going to wait until the very end. Because he's so beat up, they're obviously not going to want him to be in there for a very long time or really even take a whole lot of bumps at this point. So what they do is they have Randy Orton come out, walk all nice and slow like he does, get in the cage, and immediately RKO, not Cody Rhodes, Seth Rollins. Immediately. Bam! Down goes the world champion. And then Randy Orton just sits in the corner, lets Judgment Day do what they must. Judgment Day wins. Because you know who else needs a new feud? Seth.
Yes.
Seth needs a feud badly.
Yes.
You already have your story between Jay and Drew. So that's good. Whatever you want. Sammy can do whatever the heck he wants. You want to transition to him fighting Gunther? That would give me very nice feelings in my stomach. That would be great. I would like that very much. You want to do that? You want to do something else? Heck, you want to have him join Alpha Academy and start dancing? I don't care what you have him do. Whatever you want to do. Is that not wonderful, by the way? Yes. Akira Tozawa kills me. Anyway, the only person in that chamber, outside of Randy, that does not have a story to go back to is Seth. And so I think you have Randy RKO Seth. Have that cost the team. Cody doesn't take the loss. Because Cody, right now, has already involved himself with bloodline stuff. He's already there.
Yeah.
And maybe you want to do a Cody and Sammy tag team for a little bit. That'd be fun, I guess. You want to keep Cody around Jay? I don't care what you do. Cody's going to be phenomenal no matter what he does. Yep. But I think at this point, what you're going to have to do is you're probably going to have to transition Cody to SmackDown at some point soon. Because he's already been on SmackDown. He's already got involved with bloodline stuff. He's now been on SmackDown for a total of 28 minutes and has had 2 showdowns with the bloodline in 28 minutes. You do that math, that is a showdown every 14 minutes on SmackDown with the bloodline. You're clearly saying that Cody and the bloodline are not done. You're clearly saying that to everybody. That you're not hiding it.
Right.
So, do you have Cody go to SmackDown? And do you have him do stuff with the bloodline for a little while? Maybe. But, to kind of also piggyback off of this, we'll talk about the man that shall not be named. I don't think his next opponent is LA Knight. I don't think his next opponent is Cody Rhodes. Obviously, they're saving that for Mania. I think his next opponent's AJ. Because AJ's been out with injury. Yep. I don't know if he actually had a real injury that they're covering, or if they're doing the storyline and giving him some time off, which he very much deserves. He's literally phenomenal. So, I think that's your Rumble match. Your Rumble title match. I think AJ versus Roman would just be a good, fun, awesome story that, he goes out there, maybe Carl Anderson helps out with the bloodline, and maybe Luke Gallows comes back from his injury. He's been out for 6 months? Something crazy. He's been out for a while. I think that'd be a fun story to tell. Roman will obviously still win, but it'll still be a good match, and everybody would enjoy it. I think that's the way you want it. Probably they're gonna go. If obviously AJ is not legitimately injured and he's not ready to come back, I don't know what the deal is there, but I think that would be fun. But I just think that the only person in the War Games match that doesn't have a story that really needs one is Seth. Right. And so I think that's where you take Randy and have Randy be Seth's next opponent for the next month, 2 months, whatever. Have it be, whatever the next PLE is, and then Rumble. I don't care. Like, do that. That'd be fine.
Yeah.
And then, after that, maybe Gunther wins the Rumble and immediately says, I want Seth, and you're good to go. There's your Mania match. Spoiler, I think Gunther's going to lose his title soon. I don't know to who, but somebody, right? Kofi Kingston, why not? Go Kofi. No. But Akira Tozawa, that's who it's going to be. Oh, dude, I would laugh so hard. Anyway, no, I think that's what's going to happen. I think the Judgment Day is going to go over because Randy's going to turn not on Cody, but on Seth. I don't know if you have any feelings about that.
I like where you're going there. I think that's very plausible. Again, it's... Drew could cost their team. Randy, Sammy could cost. Again, we're trying to figure. It's kind of a needing of severing of tie with all these guys on Team Rhodes, severing their ties from Judgment Day. Sans Drew. Again, we don't. Drew's not really Judgment Day. But again, you can do a lot of things. With that. I wouldn't be surprised. I think that's what everybody kind of expects is Orton to turn on someone.
I think that most people are expecting it to be Cody, and that's exactly why I think it's not going to be Cody.
Yeah.
I think that they're going to just say, you thought kind of right, but not really.
Right, we need a little bit of a surprise in that match still. We don't want to be too predictable. And that could be it. So, so we both agree Judgment Day, but via Orton.
Yeah. Now, here's the last question here, obviously. We've been probably talking about this long enough at this point for people to, want to have their heads pop off. Last question. What about Damian? What about the Money in the Bank contract? If, let's just pretend that I'm right, which I won't be, but let's just pretend that I am, Orton turns on Seth. Does Damian just immediately cash in? And Seth just laying there? And there goes the world title, and now you've got Damian Priest as your world champion? Because let's be honest, all the plans that I'm talking about here of Gunther winning the title at Mania and all this stuff that I think would just be so wonderful, none of that factors in Damian Priest.
No.
And so, unless you're just going to have him, go to NXT and cash in for some random reason,
right.
There's no story where he cashes in on Roman, because I swear on everything that I love in the world, including the Lord himself, if Roman Reigns' 18 million day reign ends in a Money in the Bank cash-in, I'm quitting wrestling. I'm never watching it again. I'm out. I'll be like, there's no way that that's the decision that you chose to make, right?
Right.
So, there's no way that's happening. So that means it has to be the world title that you're cashing the Money in the Bank contract in. And so if it's not on Seth, then where does that happen? Because Money in the Bank happens, right after Mania now. Yeah. It's not like it used to be where it was, Mania, and then, June and July rolls around and it's Money in the Bank. It's Mania, and then May. It's April, Mania, May, Money in the Bank. Right away, maybe early June. So, it's... Once you get to Mania, you don't have a lot of time at that point.
Right. And the way we're at least expecting the E to build towards the big Mania matches, you're not going to have Priest cash in on one of those lines. Unless that's what it is. They're waiting for him to build a storyline for him to cash in. But, unless he does it, unless he just, I guess that's the thing. Do you have him cash in on a random Raw one night? Or do you have him cash in on a PLE? Which, if I've looked at things right, it's this PLE, it's Survivor Series. The next one is Rumble.
Oh, they don't have a PLE in between.
Unless they throw another one in there last second.
That's 8 weeks. I guess that could work.
As of right now, it's Survivor Series, Rumble, Elimination Chamber. I believe there might be one. No, anyway, but it's like, yeah, if you don't do it now, you're basically waiting until Rumble, or you do it on a random Raw. You know, maybe they have a super show planned out for something towards the end of the year.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that, you know, this might be this is a reasonable conversation for, you know, why people are saying maybe Damian leaves Judgment Day. It's because he needs to be a good guy for Mania. Maybe. You know, maybe that's the case, right? Maybe that's your Gunther match. I think that would be a little bit less money of a draw versus Seth, but unfortunately, I think Seth is so dang good that they don't want to put... He's like Shawn Michaels. Like, they don't want to put him in a world title match at WrestleMania if they can help it, because whatever match he has, regardless of what it's for, is going to be an absolute just classic. And so that's why they put him with Cody. That's why they, you know, they put him with Logan Paul. You know, like, because they know the Seth Rollins match is going to be great. Yeah. And so they don't need to have that for a world title at this point. So I think he's sometimes too good for his own good in that sense.
Right.
That his matches are so freaking good that they're just like, well, look, we could have you be in the world title match, or we could have a 5-star classic in the world title match, and you also give us a second one for not the world title over here.
Right.
Like, I think that's maybe where they go with Seth, but at that point, you know, again, who does he face? Because I think right now you're looking at Gunther's. I think Gunther should win the world title at Mania. I don't know if they're going to pull the trigger now or if they're going to wait another year for him to be IC champ again. I don't know. Right. I think LA Knight should win the US title at Mania from Logan Paul. I think Cody should win the WWE. I think it should just be babyface galore. Just woo, you know, like everybody cries the whole night, and then both nights now. But you know,
well, and I think too, just cashing in unsuccessfully hurt Damian?
Oh, 100%. It would be Baron Corbin all over again. Now, I don't know if it would spiral quite as quickly and as incredibly as Corbin did. But I think that if Damian cashes in unsuccessfully, we will... Because think about this. He is in his 40s. He's not a young man. This is a man who has cut his teeth for 20 years, kind of like LA Knight, to get to where he is. Mm-hmm. This might be the last chance he gets.
Yep.
This isn't like you know, say, again, I'm going to bring up Ilya Dragunov again, but the only reason is because I know how young he is. Like, this isn't Ilya Dragunov at 28 years old winning the Money in the Bank and not cashing it in successfully. Mm-hmm. Where, you know, you can build him back up in a matter of a year, 2 years, 3 years to get him some redemption. You could do that, theoretically. You can't do that with Damian. I think this is his one shot. I think if you believe in him enough to have him be a world champion, which I think he presents himself as one, he might not be the best world champion in the world, but he'd be a good one.
Right.
I think you've got to pull the trigger with that Money in the Bank contract, or else
you got to pull it by Rumble. I feel then. If it's not Saturday,
if he's not defending the championship at Mania as a good guy, I don't see where they're going unless they're bringing somebody in that I don't know of. And the only person that I can think of that they might bring in, he better be facing Shinsuke at WrestleMania, because if they're bringing in Kazuchika Okada,
right. Yeah, and that's the thing. You know, there's so many names that play right now where you can bring in, you know, in the next couple months. But yeah, no, I like the intriguing prospect of, you know, Damian possibly cashing in, because not only does, if Orton does turn, he turns on Rollins instead of Rhodes, that presents such an easy opportunity. Rhea could be right at ringside with the briefcase, toss it to Damian, or just have it, ref, he's cashing in right now. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's gonna be a fun show. That's all that I know. That's all that I know at this point. Well, first of all, hopefully you guys are still sticking around. But if you guys have any opinions on what we've talked about, any of the matches, any of the results, anything that we think is going to happen in the match, CM Punk coming back or not coming back, whatever it is, let me know in the comments section. I'd love to hear your guys' opinion. But Daniel, once again, thank you for coming on.
Yes, thanks for having me.
And if you have any parting words for the video?
I'm looking forward to Survivor Series. You know, again, we don't have a lot of matches, but I think they're going to be good matches. Even the Carlito match, I think that'll still be entertainment. I'm curious in that one. At least I'm very curious of where that goes afterwards. But I think the Wargames matches are going to be electric.
Oh,
That men's match might go, hour plus.
Yeah, and that's why we only have 5 matches on the card.
Maybe that's why. So, but
because the 2 Wargames matches
yeah.
were, I think, one again. I went to Survivor Series last year. They were like 45 minutes to an hour each. It was incredible.
Yeah. So looking forward to the PLE as a whole, and just looking to maybe some fresh storylines out of it. I think is the big thing. To get some fresh storylines for a lot of people here. As we are kind of knocking on the door of WrestleMania season.
Absolutely. Well, all right. I think that's going to do it. So let me know what you guys think about everything that we talked about, like I said, and I will see you all next time.